What is up? Welcome to the DFS Academy. I am your host, Ryan Weisse. With me, as always, Otton and Amandolia. We are into week 6 of the NFL. Everything's starting to feel a little bit more normal, a little bit more predictable. However, the injuries keep piling up, and I think that's a good reason, Otton, to build some more DFS lineups.
Yeah, I mean, it's the beauty of DFS. There's always someone to play. And honestly, the injuries, they open up interesting opportunities in DFS, particularly in cash. Like we'll talk about one player actually on the tournament side that I'm very intrigued by this week because he's basically free and is getting more opportunities due to injury. So it definitely shakes things up and keeps it interesting.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point because when you go back, when we think about it, that's also what opened up Juwan Jennings a few weeks ago, where he broke the slate, was the different injuries and working himself into the lineup. And you were able to call it out on this show. Good plug. Follow Austin's advice. We're going to talk about some of the great advice we gave last week. Before we do so, I want to remind you guys, subscribe, join the family here at Club Fantasy. We go live more times per week than I can count. I think I did every single show this week, so I don't even want to count. But we do DFS every Thursday and Friday morning. We have a main slate that drops for you for the Thursday show. We have a showdown slate that drops for you on Thursday, and then a main slate show that is this show that drops on Friday. So you guys can find us here to talk DFS, and we do redraft, we do everything. Just go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button. But back to DFS, if you'd like to play with us, you will find links in the description of this video and in Austin's DFS article that's going to drop tomorrow for entries into our FanDuel and DraftKings contest. They come close to filling up every week, 10 to 12 people. It's a $2 contest. Top 3 people get paid. You're not going to get rich off of this, but it's really fun. You get to see some of the practices we pitch here, or some of the tips we pitch here put to practice, and see if it works out. And you can see if you're better at DFS than us, though. Spoiler alert, we announced the winners at the end of the show. No one was better than Austin last week. We'll get to that in just a second. Austin, let's start this thing off with answers to the test. We like to take a look at last week's Milli Maker lineup, see if we got any of the players right. We did, and see how they did. So last week's Milli Maker scored 236.92. That is 4 points off from the highest we've seen this season. So the scores are starting to come in a little bit harder and faster. So let's talk about this lineup. Lamar Jackson, DeAndre Swift, Chuba Hubbard. If you tuned in last week, you heard Austin mention all 3 of those names. And then I want to talk to you a little bit about the strategy. Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Terry McLaurin, Tucker Kraft, Darius Slayton, and the Denver defense. My one contribution, the Denver defense. Austin, I happen to also have been ranked number 1 in Fantasy Pros defense and special teams rankings last week. So obviously, I'm going to get the defense right. But Austin, I noticed this as soon as you put the show sheet together. Lamar Jackson, naked, with bringbacks of Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. Now, we would never really say to bring 2 bringbacks in. This person did. But you literally said a Lamar Jackson with a Jamar Chase bringback is a perfect lineup, and it won $1 million. That Milli Maker wasn't either of us, but we were on the right track.
Yeah, I thought Lamar was a good pick last week just to take him by himself because he hasn't really correlated well with any of his receivers so far this year. So it definitely worked out. One thing I just want to flag about the person who won the Milli Maker last week, they max entered it. They put a full. So that definitely frees that person up to do some more creative things, like play both running backs in the same matchup. Because when we talked about those 2 running backs last week, I said, don't pick both.
Pick one. Play one. It's almost like, do we know the Milli Maker? Did they say, fuck you, Austin, I'm going to go ahead and play both of these, even though you told me not to?
Right. I was more like, pick one of these guys and then pick Ryan's guy, which is Josh Jacobs, which I did in other places. So by max entering, it enabled this person to get a little creative on that side, do something you wouldn't typically do. But if you had followed just like a few of these guys in smaller tournaments, you would have been very successful. You could have finished in like the top 3 to 5 in those 100s on DraftKings, which depending on the entry fee that you got means just like for a $3 one, you could have turned it into $24. That's pretty good returns for tournament plays. Like that's why I like some of the smaller contests is you're staying positive and able to build your bankroll over time.
Yeah, Austin, that kind of leads me to a tournament we talked about a few weeks ago, and they changed the name every week. But it is the $3 guaranteed overlay tournament over on FanDuel. That is the tournament I've started to jump in because, in my opinion, it's a best of both worlds. But when I was talking to you before the show, we kind of discovered why it's not a best of both worlds. And I wanted to kind of share that with our viewers. So what this tournament is it's a $3 entry on FanDuel with the top 50% being paid. So the reason I said it's a best of both worlds is you can treat it like cash because you're just trying to finish in the top 50% of the field to at least earn your money back. But it does pay higher as you get to first and second, and I think down to like 20th. It pays a little bit higher, and it's guaranteed overlay. They're not bringing in enough money to cover it. I don't know why FanDuel's doing it. I'm sure it's just a sales gimmick. But Austin, you had a unique observation because I told you I've been not max entering. I'm not that guy, but multi-entering this tournament every single week with a few of my lineups because in my head, this might have been the way to work out because it's a mini lottery ticket, but it's a little bit of a chance to get my money back. But you noticed something this week that said it may not be the best lottery ticket, and I would have you explain that a little bit.
Yeah, we talked about this a little bit when we first talked about the contest. I had speculated and wondered if this would happen, and it turns out it did. So the person, they ended up not winning. They barely lost. Somebody beat them out for the top prize, but there was one person who took all of the prizes from 2nd through 16th. They played the exact same lineup in each of those cases. And it ended up, if you look at the prizes, they actually ended up winning more than the first place prize. So it's really funny. Now, maybe the person in first place also entered elsewhere and won some money, and like they ended up being the most profitable on the slate. I don't know. But the fact that this player took down more than like what the top prize was pretty notable to me. We also saw this in the Milli Maker, actually. So shout out to Fantasy Labs. That's where I always go to like check the prior week's Milli Maker winner because I'm not playing in that contest. I don't get to see it. They pointed out that wildly enough, the person that played the Milli Maker put Lamar Jackson as the quarterback in all 150 of their lineups last week, which I do not recommend. It was a very bold move. It worked out. Wow. Because of that, they took down 3 of the top 20 spots. So that's one of the reasons that like I don't do these 150 max centers most of the time. Now it's fun. If you enjoy, like Ryan, you enjoy doing the lottery ticket and the Milli Maker. So like go for it. Like that's fine. If that's how you enjoy it, that's whatever. For me, like I'm trying to be profitable. And so I avoid these 150 max centers because people are doing weird stuff like that and just rolling out all sorts of lineups.
It sounds bananas. But I try to put myself in their shoes, and I'm going to make a wild assumption here that they've probably hit the million before because I don't know how the fuck I would act if I would hit $1 million, but I would do some ignorant shit like creating $3,000 of lineups with Lamar Jackson as the quarterback. Austin, you know this because even in my little bit of money, I'll draft A.T. Perry with the last pick of every single draft and then watch him get cut. I hope he thrives in Denver. He's not going to. But this is going to sound ridiculous because $3,000 should be treated seriously no matter what. But if you've won $1 million, $3,000 of the house money, I guess, if you got the right hunch, and clearly this person did. And like I said, I'm going to be willing to bet they've made a good amount of money off of DFS. Probably have hit the million before. And now they've made a second million by putting $3,000 of Lamar Jackson into a contest. Probably more than a second million because they had how many lineups in that contest that probably most cashed, I would guess. So
yeah, probably most cashed. Either this person has won significant money before, or they need to call that number.
Yes, I don't know what the number is, but look into it. You have a problem. No, that's awesome, Austin. But like I said, I do love that we mentioned some of these names, but way more importantly than mentioning some of these names, we mentioned a sound strategy, and I feel like that's getting good. And I'm saying we, like I had anything to do with it. I was here in the presence of you saying starting Lamar with a bring back. And again, we didn't like call out these players, but Tucker Kraft was my stream of the week tight end, people. Club Fantasy got you a lot of these players. You just had to put the right combination together. And now let's hear Austin's combination as we get into cash plays. This is Austin's specialty. When we're trying to build the bankroll, we're focusing on cash. The first segment is going to be called Top of the Class. These are the expensive players, 8K or more. Austin, you got another one for us this week. We've talked about this. The name's going to be familiar, but this season, there's only a few names that are even cracking that dollar amount.
Yeah. So first off, and I did actually take a player that was over 8K on DraftKings this week with CeeDee Lamb, who is a whopping 8,600 on DraftKings. He's the most expensive player on the slate. He's 9,300 on FanDuel. Actually, not the most expensive player on FanDuel because Jamar Chase is. Hint, I'm not playing Jamar Chase. But there are some game environment reasons to target CeeDee Lamb, and then just also the role he has in the offense. So this game environment will be the best one on the slate. It is currently at a 52-point over-under between Dallas and Detroit. Interestingly, Dallas are underdogs in this situation. They have a 24.5-point implied team total. CeeDee Lamb has just been very good. He's always good. And since week 2, the Detroit Lions have allowed the 5th most points to the position. So we're hitting that part of the year where I will start comparing like what has happened season long versus what has happened over a 4-week sample size to see like what has shifted, because the apps are going to show you the season long numbers. They're going to show you the season long matchup numbers. But I want to see what's happened in the past 4 weeks to see if that's kind of changed throughout the year. Lions, earlier in the season, I was saying like outside corners, we're not going to, or outside receivers, we're not going to play them that much. But CeeDee also moves into the slot a ton. And in fact, is pretty efficient from the slot. So I think he's going to move around and do fine. And Detroit's not been doing well against the pass. And also, Dallas has not been doing good running the ball. They can't run the ball. They don't have good running backs. And Detroit is a really tough run defense. So I foresee Dallas throwing the ball a ton in this matchup, which should mean that CeeDee Lamb easily hits this mark.
Yeah, the last time we saw Detroit on the field, they gave up 395 yards to Geno Smith. So I like what Dallas offers here. It's funny, I had kind of forgotten that until last night's show with Joe. He pointed out, someone asked us about Dak versus Goff in the same game. And I said Goff at first, but Joe's like, we saw what Geno did to this defense. I think we kind of have to go Dak here, and he talked me into it. So I like that pick because obviously if Dak's slinging it for 395 yards, it's going to be a really nice game for CeeDee Lamb.
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely so, and that gets a little bit into our next category.
Oh, I see that. Yeah, let's just jump in. $6,000 to $8,000 players. We call them the band nerds, not quite ready to take the top spot. And yeah, you're right. That perfectly leads to the next play.
Yeah, so I will take Dak Prescott this week. He is only $6,700 on DraftKings, which, again, if you're new to DFS Cash, when we're playing DFS lineups, what our target is we're looking for players who can hit 3 times their salary. And so for Dak Prescott this week, if he scores 20.1 points, he is doing that. He is sufficiently helping us hit the cash line. He can easily do that. I am shying away from some of the more expensive quarterbacks this week because I think there is a little bit of fragility with some of them this week. So instead, I'll go with Dak Prescott. Again, he's going to probably throw the ball a ton. Like, I wouldn't be shocked if he threw the ball 45, 50 times in this game. And with that amount of volume, he should be able to hit 300 yards, get the 3-point bonus for that. I would be shocked if he didn't score 2 or 3 touchdowns. So it seems like this is an easy bar for him to hit. He is a little more expensive on FanDuel. He's at $8K there. But even then, like on FanDuel, if he's getting to 3X, like that's 24 points. That's still pretty good. And on FanDuel, because of the way the scoring is and the pricing structure is, he doesn't quite have to hit 3X. Like if he's getting close to 3X, that's really good. So I feel comfortable with Prescott on both sites this week.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And that was one of the first things I noticed when I was doing my rankings today was that the quarterbacks feel way more like a value on DraftKings right now. On FanDuel, the good quarterbacks have all been priced up into that 8K range. And with the 10K difference in salary, I just don't feel like I'm either getting way too much of a discount on DraftKings or they're going way too high on FanDuel. But either way, I feel uncomfortable with quarterbacks on FanDuel right now. So that's a great call out on your part. For your next pick, I do want to say, as soon as I was creating my running back rankings today, I noticed we're starting to get a good price discount. I'm going to let you convince me that it's worth that discount.
I mean, Bijan Robinson is only $6,600 on DraftKings. That's pretty nice. He's $8,500 on FanDuel. So clearly the two websites disagree about how this is going to go. Usually if the websites are in line with each other, players are about $1,000 away from each other. This is almost a $2,000 gap. I think some of that's because FanDuel is a half PPR site. So when your players who score touchdowns are more valuable over there. And Bijan Robinson, he hasn't really actually hit some of the PPR upside that we would expect from him. But he plays the Carolina Panthers this week, who are garbage. the Falcons have a 26.5 point implied team total, which is honestly, it's the third highest implied total on the slate, which is impressive given the fact that their game has the sixth highest or fifth highest over under. No, yes, sixth highest over under on the week. So they are favored by 6 points. Like they should be running the ball and playing from ahead in this matchup. Bijan Robinson has continued to carry the load in the backfield. He has 67 rush attempts compared to Tyler Allgeier's 33. That's still like a decent amount of work for Tyler Allgeier, which is annoying for Bijan Robinson managers. But Bijan also has 19 targets on the season. So that's averaging just around 4 per game, which is still really good. So honestly, the volume is there. The price is so good and the matchup is incredible. I would be surprised if Bijan Robinson fails this week. So I'll probably be playing him in cash almost everywhere. He is questionable. I think he probably plays this week. But if something happens throughout the week in the injury reports and he doesn't play, Tyler Allgeier then becomes a 100% lock because you're going to get such a discount in the salary realm.
And for those who may be wondering, in cash, you don't care that everyone's playing Tyler Allgeier. You need that free space just like they need that free space. You're basically looking to take advantage of the suckers who are like, I'm not going to play Tyler Allgeier. You have to play him if that were to happen. But Austin, this kind of brings a game theory thing up for me here. You mentioned the implied total, the implied win by Atlanta lends itself to them be running the ball. Obviously, we saw Atlanta go off passing the ball last week. Is this a situation where there's a little bit of scariness to the passing game because they could get out early? So their passing game players are more of a tournament play because you're hoping, whereas Bijan feels a little bit safer.
Yeah, I do think there's some fragility in the pass game side this week. Also because last time we saw them, they threw for 500 yards. That's not going to happen every time. I could see that coming back down to earth. So I could see playing the pass catchers in tournaments. I actually also like Bijan Robinson as a tournament play because if people are saying like, oh, he's not really doesn't have that ceiling, and then suddenly he pops off for 3 touchdowns because he's playing the Carolina Panthers, like that's going to be real. That's going to separate you really well in tournaments. So I probably am going to be fading the pass catchers in general, but if I'm like doing a 20 max enter or I'm doing multiple lineups, I might throw a pass catcher in there here or there. Particularly like one of the cheaper ones, which we'll actually talk about later.
Perfect. That makes sense. I'm going to talk about one of the more expensive ones later, but what I did notice was with Bijan going down, both the pass catchers went up, and it does make it's a little tougher to create lineups, certainly with like a Cousins London stack. The Cousins isn't terribly expensive, but even just fitting London into a lineup is not the easiest thing, as you guys will hear a little bit later on. Austin, we're going to move on to Bookworms. We are looking at the guys now at the $4,000 to $6,000 price range. These are the quiet guys, nose in the books, but easily underestimated. But they're the ones who could end up winning this thing for you when you want those cheaper pass catchers, Austin.
Yeah, so we'll start with Josh Downs, who is 5,500 on DraftKings, 6,100 on FanDuel. I feel great about the fact that Josh Downs is just broken out.
I'm going to interrupt just real quick. You have been on these Colts pass catchers, and I have been coming at you every time, but I have to give you credit. You've hit it almost every single time. So I know you're going to talk about this, but if you don't, I want you to mention, do you care if it's Anthony Richardson or Joe Flacco? Go ahead.
I do not care because in particular this week, there's a good chance that Michael Pittman is not playing. He's currently
out.
He's officially out now.
He's not officially out, but they're calling it a multi. No, actually he is. I checked my Fantasy Pros rankings today. He is officially out now. So
okay, last I saw he was doubtful, so he's officially out now. So Josh Downs has already been killing it on targets. With Michael Pittman in the lineup, he after coming back from injury, he had 5 targets in week 3, 9 targets in week 4, which was when we first were in on him, and then 12 targets in week 5. Now he has one less pass catcher ahead of him. So I think the targets will stay there. And it's also one of those situations, even if Anthony Richardson comes back and the overall pass volume goes down because Anthony Richardson can run the ball, there's less competition for those touches. And so Downs can maintain a solid target share and a solid target volume on that. The Titans is kind of a not great matchup. Like I don't feel good about the matchup personally, but the volume is there, and he's still cheap enough that it's not going to scare me off. Like, he's only up to $5,500 on DraftKings, so I still feel good given the volume. It's just going to be hard to not play him until we see somebody else separate. And I'm trying to play CeeDee Lamb. I've got to find some cheap salaries elsewhere. And there haven't been good, super cheap receivers throughout the season so far. It's been very hard to find players below 4K to play that you can rely on. So I'll take Josh Downs, and I'll try and squeeze in some 5K guys to match with CeeDee Lamb.
Yeah, we have not found a below 4K running back or wide receiver, I don't believe, in the run of this show for the 2024 season. But you do have a wide receiver that got damn close for your next pick.
Yeah, so I am interested in playing Ray McCloud this week, despite what I was just saying about fading Atlanta pass catchers.
Well, no, but it makes sense because there's a theory here that you're going to go with, and it does make sense that maybe the more you've already kind of touched on this, you need 2 to 3 times the score when you get down to this price range, and it's going to be a lot harder to get that from Drake London or Darnell Mooney if things don't go exactly how they did last week. So.
Yes, exactly. And Ray McCloud, he's down at $4,300 on DraftKings and $5,600 on FanDuel. It's been kind of surprising to see how much of a target volume he's been getting the past couple of weeks. Maybe it's just they're passing the ball a ton overall, and so it's enabling him to have the opportunities. But when they played New Orleans, he had 7 targets. He had 9 targets last week against Tampa Bay. I kind of don't expect that this week when they're playing the Panthers. But if he gets 5 targets at 4,300 and maybe he scores a touchdown, like, that's fine. The Panthers have also been garbage against receivers this week. Like, they've just been this year, so they've been a bad defense in general. So I'm actually not afraid of playing both Bijan Robinson and Ray McCloud, just also because McCloud is so cheap, it's going to be fine. I'm mostly going to him so that I can get to guys like CeeDee Lamb.
No, that makes a lot of sense, and that's something I noticed with building my lineup this week for our DraftKings one-on-one, is that when you get an expensive receiver, or God forbid 2, you have to find a cheap flex play and a cheap wide receiver 3. And it took me a couple iterations of building my lineup before I got something I was ready to announce on this show. And I still don't love it, but I'm going to ride with it. We'll get to the tournament place here in just a moment, but let's end the cash section with C's Get Degrees. These are the sub $4,000 players. It's been all tight ends in defense this season, Austin, and it's another tight end this week.
Yes, Cade Otton, who I kind of love. I was a big fan of him in best ball season. I think he was probably ended up being one of my more higher exposure tight ends. Not 100%. I'm not like you, Ryan. I'm not going to go 100% on a player in best ball, but
only one, and he broke my heart.
yeah, it was up there. But Cade Otton, he's $3,500 on DraftKings. He's $5,200 on FanDuel. Since week 2, New Orleans have allowed the 3rd most points to the tight end position. We just saw them getting eaten up by Travis Kelce, so that's part of the reason that's also pushed up. To be frank, I don't expect Cade Otton to have a Travis Kelce level of performance. However, he has had ridiculous target volume over the past 3 weeks, particularly for a player who is only 3,500. Since week 3, his targets have been 8, 9, and 4. So it went down last week, but he still has produced over 40 receiving yards in all 3 of those games. And he's been a pretty viable cash tight end without scoring a touchdown in any of those matchups. So I'm kind of going for it again and saying, yeah, if he gets a decent amount of volume, if he gets 5 targets, 5+ targets, and scores a touchdown, he's going to pay off in cash. And it's kind of weird. I could see him being a tournament play too, because I don't think people are going to want to play him that much. So it kind of cuts both ways, but I feel comfortable playing him in cash this week as well.
No, it's interesting because the first two weeks of the season, he was not looking good, was not well involved, but they've very blatantly gotten him more involved as these weeks have progressed. And so I think there's still a little bit of an advantage to be had with him, because you mentioned, in tournaments, you don't think people are going to play him. I think there's a long memory, and he hasn't been that great. And if you're looking for someone who could potentially, break the slate, we saw Travis Kelce have a really good game last week. I don't think he scored a touchdown because he doesn't score touchdowns anymore. But there's the opportunity for Cade Otton to find the end zone, especially if Mike Evans gets into one of his classic Marshawn Lattimore fights, though he addressed today that he understands he gets too emotional when playing Marshawn Lattimore. So we'll see if there's any truth to that. No, I love those plays. That is going to be the end of the cash talk. If you are looking for more cash, Austin will have an article dropping Saturday morning where he gives the rest of his favorite cash plays. Great article, great stuff, and links to the tournaments you can play with us because we run tournaments every single week on FanDuel and DraftKings. FanDuel is just for the main slate. Over on DraftKings, we do the showdown slates. And again, sometimes there's 3 people in the tournament. Sometimes there's 12 people in the tournament. You guys jump in, there will be more. So look for the links in the description of this video and in Austin's article. We are now going to move on to the tournament plays. If you're looking to make $1 million, one of these names is probably going to be in that lineup. Maybe 2 or 3 if you can pick the right ones out. Austin, go ahead and get us started. Austin, for the first time, you're giving me multiple options at quarterback now too. So
yeah, I'm not going to get detailed about all of the quarterbacks. I just need to shout out 2 guys because I'm going to be honest. I had a hard time figuring out how I wanted to attack this slate ahead of this show. And the way my process works is I start by doing research for the showdown slate and then for the show. And then I do research for the article. And then I start listening to what other people have to say. And so to get a sense of like how I'm approaching this, like I'm doing it all by looking at recent matchups, by looking at the slate and thinking about what I expect people to flock to. I think people are going to flock away from Lamar Jackson this week as like bonkers as that sounds, given that he just won somebody $1 million. I think people are still going to shy away from him being $7,800 on DraftKings. He's the most expensive quarterback. He's still probably going to be decently rostered. But I don't think it's going to be like over the top that it's like it's preventing you from getting different. And I think it's a really good bet to make because he has scored over 20 fantasy points. I think almost over 25 fantasy points in each of his last 3 matchups. And Washington has been allowing quarterbacks to cook on them. Like, yeah, their defense has started to kind of get it together in recent weeks, but they've been in a bunch of shootouts back like over and over again. So I kind of see Lamar continuing the trend that he started last week where he continues to push. I also think that people are going to want to play Ryan's quarterback. And so this is a good way to get different and get leverage off of that.
I think they won't, and for mainly the reasons you've been saying. And so go ahead and do your 2 shout outs, and then we'll jump into mine. So.
Yeah, I just want to quickly shout out Jared Goff and Jordan Love. These are 2 guys that I think could go really overlooked this week, and I am interested in playing them. Jared Goff, just like the 1-sentence version, is I think people are going to be betting that Detroit is going to do a good job running the ball on Dallas this week. And if we say flip the script and say actually they pass the ball a ton coming off the bye week, then maybe Jared Goff is in the optimal lineup. And then on the Green Bay side with Jordan Love, the matchup is like fine because Arizona's actually been playing pretty well against quarterbacks. But it's also a pretty big over under. They're one of the higher over unders on the slate. It's at 47 points. It's not like shooting the moon or anything. But I still think that like Jordan Love, he's been playing really well. It's been like from a fantasy perspective. Yeah. From a football perspective, it's been a little bit, Green Bay's had a little bit of a tough time.
Yeah.
But I think Jordan Love can easily get there. He can easily throw for 300 yards. And Arizona's offense has been pushing their opponents to have to continue to stay active in games. And so I think that actually benefits Jordan Love and that he might get overlooked for a lot of the rushing quarterbacks that have had a lot of success in recent weeks.
So I don't do nearly the research that Austin does. DFS is one small part of what I do, and I'm not very good at it, but I do rank them. So my thought process on Jaden Daniels, who is my favorite tournament quarterback, was very similar to yours on Lamar Jackson. I was thinking people don't want to pay up for quarterbacks because when I initially was going to make my list, it was Jared Goff, it was Jordan Love, it was Dak Prescott. But I'm like, everyone else is going to see that. They're going to see that over under on that Detroit-Dallas game. And I think that's going to be the more chalk. They're not going to want to pay up. And I think the Baltimore defense still carries a reputation that blatantly right now they don't deserve. They are giving up a ton of points to wide receivers. I think it could be a great week for Terry McLaurin. They're giving up a ton of points to tight ends. Zach Ertz is my stream of the week. And Brian Robinson is banged up in this game. Austin Eckler did not look great last week. So I agree, Austin, this could be a situation where people just want a piece of this game and they're going to take the $500 cheaper quarterback. And I guess, but I don't know that he'll be chalk enough that I'm worried about running him out there in tournaments.
Yeah. And I think that's fair. And honestly, it's hard to get too chalky with quarterbacks in general. Like it's usually the rostership percentage isn't pushed up that much like the way we would see running backs and receivers. So I don't worry about chalk as much with quarterbacks.
Okay.
But I do think I think you could pick either one of these players for that very reason. I do think that there's going to be I think there's a potential for a lot of games to pull interest. I think these two games in particular that we're talking about, the Dallas-Detroit and the Baltimore-Washington games, I do think that there will be a lot of people attacking those in different ways. So I think getting unique will be the key. Like maybe this is a week where you play Jaden Daniels naked, like we tried to do with Lamar Jackson this week, and say like the pass catchers don't get there. Because honestly, like McLaurin has gotten there on explosive plays. He has not had good volume. None of the pass catchers in Washington have had good volume. So that's part of the reason I actually don't like attacking the Washington side too, is I don't have a good stacking partner there.
There's no storyline for it. So
right. And similar with Lamar, like you could almost play just Lamar again. I like Zay Flowers because he's getting more volume, but I tried to line up with Mark Andrews last week just because I wanted to hold out hope. Didn't really work out. So
wasn't as bad as Eric All.
Yeah, you lost some money on that.
Yeah, I'm sure I did. I lost money. I lost my own money on that. So.
But yeah, I think there's many ways to go after this. You could do the rushing quarterbacks, and I do think paying up, to your point, I do think paying up for quarterback is actually a way to get contrarian. So I'm kind of talking out of both sides of my mouth because I think more people will want to play Lamar and Jaden because they know the ceiling is there and they've just seen it so consistently. And I think paying down is also beneficial or paying up is also beneficial because, yeah, there's like, you could cut it both ways.
Well, we're also trying to figure out the psychology here because there's a psychology of I'm not going to play Lamar because he's not going to do it again, or the psychology of Lamar just won someone $1 million. He's going to win me $1 million. And then there's the same psychology of Jaden Daniels didn't look great against Cleveland last week, so I'm going to avoid him, or he's due for a bounce back, so I'm going to play him. So figuring that out is, the fun part of DFS. Who knew this was a psychology lesson as well? We're going to move on to the running backs. And if you guys are not aware, if you've never tuned into the show, Austin is the DFS expert. I am the host. Austin is going to give you multiple plays at these following positions so that you can build a lineup just using his advice, which is something I advise. I just kind of throw in my one contrarian play. Maybe you mix and match. I'm good at defense. I'll tell you that right now. But Austin, you got two running backs for me.
Yeah, he used to run just a defense only dedicated article, right?
Yes, I did for football guys, or for the fantasy footballers rather. So
nice. But my first running back that I have this week in tournaments is Najee Harris, who is $5,800 on DraftKings, $7,200 on FanDuel. One thing I like about Najee Harris, he's still been getting a decent amount of pass game utilization. So there's some PPR upside that he can have on the DraftKings side of things. He's also, I think Jaylen Warren is still out. And so Harris will continue to get most of the carries. The Raiders, they go up against the Raiders this week. They have allowed the fifth most points to the running back position since week 2. So the matchup is really good. Pittsburgh is favored in this situation by 3 points. It's a gross game environment. The over-under is 36.5 points. That is disgusting. This is the only player I will play from this matchup. I am not stacking, correlating, any of that nonsense with this. I'm taking Najee Harris, and I'm running.
No Justin Fields naked. You're not even messing around with that.
I don't hate it. I just don't. I think there's not, like, on the flip side, there's no reason to push him. There's going to be no offense on the Vegas side to push Justin Fields to hit his ceiling. If there was a better offense on the other side of the ball, I would consider it.
There was a quote from Arthur Smith this week, and I'm going to butcher the quote, but you guys are going to get the point, where he talked about how he's using George Pickens situationally and how he just won't be out there for third down sometimes because he did that early on in his career with AJ Brown and Kyle Pitts. And it's like, you're just doubling down on why we all hate you, man. Like, play your best players. What is wrong with you? So Arthur Smith ruining fantasy leagues every week. So I agree. Najee Harris, my one hang up with Najee, and he's still a great DFS play. I'm not disparaging your play. When I watch this offense, I don't know that Najee is going to score a touchdown this year. And he may have scored one already. I don't think he did, though. But this offense, it's just so Justin Fields focused. I have trouble finding the situation where Najee Harris scores a touchdown. Like I cannot find it, and it's bothering me. So that's my one worry with Najee. But you hit the best point is that he's involved in the passing game. Not only Jalen Warren missing time, Cordero Patterson's already been announced out for the week. So behind Najee is literally dust. They're gonna have to keep running this guy.
Okay, but what if I told you that the Raiders have allowed touchdowns to J.K. Dobbins and Derrick Henry?
I'm not telling you it's never going to happen. I don't even know that it hasn't happened yet this season, but I'm almost positive it has not happened this season. Just based on I've had money on Najee scoring a touchdown because of course he's eventually going to score a touchdown. He's not. It's not going to happen. And I am correct. He has not scored a touchdown this season. Yeah. I just double checked my stats there. But anyway, you got another running back for me.
Yeah, I do. Which, side note, though, that is why he's a better DraftKings play than a FanDuel play.
The PPR aspect of it. So
exactly. But my other running back is once again Josh Jacobs. We're going back to the well with him, as we did last week. He continues to have the volume. He's averaging around 20 touches. He's not as involved in the pass game as Najee Harris is, which is a little bit of a bummer. I think that would make me feel better about playing Josh Jacobs. But the volume is there enough, and they're playing the Cardinals this week, who have also been struggling against running backs in recent weeks. So I think Josh Jacobs, we know he has the upside and the talent that he could have a wild 3-touchdown game. Like that's definitely in his bag. And this Green Bay offense has been known to produce those types of performances. We've seen Aaron Jones do that type of thing where he just pops off for a bunch of touchdowns. So I feel comfortable with Josh Jacobs from that perspective. He's only $6,700 on DraftKings. I also almost contemplated him for a cash play because of the amount of volume he's getting in the matchup being favorable. I'm not talking about this player when we get to the receivers, but I want to throw out that if you're playing this on FanDuel, I highly recommend Marvin Harrison as a bring back on FanDuel. He's only $7K on FanDuel, which is bonkers. He's cheaper on FanDuel than he is on DraftKings, which
that's what we look for, folks. That's what we look for. So. Yeah. No, that's an awesome call out. Yeah, Harrison, like Bijan, it's like the score makers, the price makers have decided we're going to start lowering the price on these guys, and they may have gone too far, and it's going to be real interesting. So for me, this is a play on both, but man, do I love Jahmyr Gibbs on DraftKings. Again, game environment. Again, Dallas defense is getting respect that they do not deserve right now. They're giving up a ton of points to running backs, maybe the most, if I remember correctly. Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery, I actually like both of them. When I did my FanDuel rankings, they're my number 1 and number 2 running backs because we've seen them both score in multiple games. But more importantly, Jahmyr Gibbs still heavily involved in the passing game. He's back to fully healthy. I like what we're seeing out of Jahmyr Gibbs. I like what this game environment with Dallas provides. I think he's a great play at only $7K on DraftKings.
Yeah, what's hilarious about this, Ryan, is that I literally almost picked David Montgomery for this segment this week.
Yeah. Because I would not have fought with you. I think he's a great play. So
yeah, and I think I do think just picking one of the running backs in Detroit is a good matchup. To your point, Ryan, they've Dallas has allowed the 5th most points overall in the season to the running back position. It's been a little bit worse in recent weeks. They've allowed the 4th most since week 2. Detroit, they are projected to score about 28 points in this game. So it definitely could favor the running backs. I personally, if I'm in tournaments, I kind of like going the David Montgomery route slightly more than the Jahmyr Gibbs one, because I think more people would think, oh, Jahmyr Gibbs, he gets the pass game and the run game. Yeah. But if David Montgomery scores 2 touchdowns, it's going to negate the pass game upside that Jahmyr Gibbs has. But I think you could pick either one. And I enter multiple lineups every week. And so I think having exposure to both is a good way to get access to this game without going overboard, because you're gonna want to get creative about how you attack this Detroit game, because a lot of people are going to want to play it.
Yeah, I think that makes a ton of sense. The one thing I noticed, and it makes sense, Gibbs is more expensive on DraftKings than Montgomery. Montgomery is actually $100 more on FanDuel because they recognize that Montgomery falls into the end zone. It's what he does. And so on FanDuel, that just provides a lot more value. Austin's going to break down 4 wide receivers for you guys. These are our tournament plays. If you're looking to get into the big ones, the Milli makers, or even some of the smaller tournaments where it's more of a top heavy payout, these are the guys we like to make your lineup a little bit different. Austin?
Yeah. So first off, I'm building off of the point I was talking about earlier with looking at Lamar Jackson on the Baltimore side. I'm interested in going back to Zay Flowers, honestly. He is $6,500 on DraftKings. He's only 7,200 on FanDuel. His volume has been there. It's been a little bit like hit or miss. There was those 2 weeks that Derrick Henry really was the offense, that Zay Flowers had less volume. But last week when they had to pass the ball more, Zay Flowers was back to having a ton of volume. He got 7 balls, had over 100 yards. He did not make it in the end zone. So he was scoring 20 DraftKings points without a touchdown. So if you repeat that performance this week and he's able to fall into the end zone, which this Washington defense, again, not great. They've been allowing an average of 36.5 points to the receiver position since week 2. That's the 12th most in the league. So they're kind of average, but like they can be passed on. We've seen people pass the ball a ton on them. Joe Burrow had sort of a get right game against them a couple of weeks ago. And so I like Zay Flowers from the volume perspective there. On the other side, I do like Terry McLaurin. I'm not going to go overboard with him though. Just because of what I mentioned earlier, like he got there last week. He was in the Milli Maker winning contest, as we discussed earlier. However, he did that on 4 catches, and his volume is what scares me the most. But I wanted to throw him out because if you were deciding, like, I want to get a lot of exposure to this game, I think he's kind of the only guy you can do it with. I don't feel good enough about Luke McCaffrey yet. I don't feel good enough about Zach Ertz. Like all of these pass catchers outside of McLaurin, even McLaurin himself to some extent, are really like they're getting like 3 or 4 catches a game at their peak. McLaurin is the only one that I think has the potential to get 7, 8 balls in a game. So I like him from that perspective, but I'll probably be shifting around my exposure depending on the situation. 2 guys I like that are super cheap this week, and I think could also go overlooked. The first is Xavier Legette, who is $4,900 on DraftKings and $5,900 on FanDuel. I think this is particularly important to identify some of these guys this week, where if you're playing somebody like Lamar Jackson, you're going to need to save money elsewhere. Yeah. I also have kind of I didn't punt a tight end this week, so I need to find some other places to punt. But Legette, he's going to likely be the wide receiver 2 this week with Adam Thielen still on the IR. And Deontay Johnson has been a little bit banged up too. So Legette could get even more run because of that. Legette, he didn't have a good week last week, but he left the game due to injury. He's already a full participant back in practice. And 2 weeks ago, when there was no Adam Thielen, he got a ton of target volume, ended up scoring, I think, close to 20 DraftKings points. And at this price point, that is going to be crucial. Similar, another guy that is going to benefit from people being injured in front of him is Xavier Hutchinson. I also contemplated putting him as a cash play this week because the salary's at $3,300. We have not had a receiver that value this year at all.
I was just going to say, you could have finally given us a receiver punt play, but you decided not to.
I decided not to. So I could easily see him being like a 60, 70% rostered player in cash tournaments. If people are like, you know what, if he's $3,300, we need 9 points from him, like whatever, let's just throw him there. And then I can get CeeDee Lamb, I can get Dak Prescott, or maybe if people want to play Lamar Jackson in cash, you can get both CeeDee Lamb and Lamar Jackson by punting off and saying, yeah, whatever, Xavier Hutchinson, you just sit there in my lineup and maybe do something. I could see that he did also get 3 targets in the game after Nico Collins exited. So he was already getting involved, which is a good sign. But because of that, I'm also intrigued by him in tournaments because he allows me to pay up elsewhere in my lineup.
Plus, expert analysis, you have an ability to start 2 guys named Xavier. And I just don't think you can pass that up when it's just staring you right in the face. So I love it. No, I think those are both great plays. The Legette thing, you hit the thing I wanted to bring up was he left last week's game early, but he's saying he's fine now, and they're saying he's fine now. So don't freak out about one bad game. But since Thielen has been out of that lineup, Legette has just kind of stepped in and done very, very well. We've alluded to mine already. I think you're going to see a ton of people go the way of Darnell Mooney because we saw the 2 touchdowns of Darnell Mooney if they believe that Kirk Cousins can do this again, or more likely, they don't believe that Kirk Cousins can do this again and they're going to shy away from this game. Drake London's at that like interesting price point. I love the 2 guys that Austin mentioned. Zay Flowers is at 6,500. Terry McLaurin's at 6,400. Neither one of them has had a monster game. Zay Flowers is at 6,700 coming off of a monster game last week. And Carolina, as Austin brought up, has been bad against everything. So there is a chance this is a Bijan game and Drake London's a throwaway. But there's also a chance that Drake London scores 2 or 3 touchdowns this week if they're out there slinging the ball. And that's kind of what I'm buying into here, Austin, is I understand in tournament play, things can go either way. I'm betting it's going to go the way I want it to go.
Yeah, here's the thing that actually gets me a little bit intrigued by this play and the pass catchers is the cynical Falcons fan in me sees that this is a 425 game. And I'm like, y'all put us in the afternoon slate against the Carolina Panthers. What could go wrong?
Yeah.
Everything could go wrong. We could lose this game, come 1 week off of beating Tampa Bay and becoming division favorites. And then all of a sudden, Andy Dalton's like, you know what? It's time to pull up. And I'm afraid of that happening because this will be in a national spotlight. And if that happens, like Drake London could very well have a 10 catch day. And he's got that ability. So I don't hate it. I wouldn't overweight it, but I think it's a good play here and there.
I completely agree. And we're going to move on to the tight ends. And as you mentioned, Austin, you did not pay down this week. I had a feeling you were going to bring up this guy, but now I want to hear if you say what I think you're going to say. But go ahead and talk about it.
Well, what I'm going to say is Jake Ferguson apparently is just like a volume hog and nobody is paying attention to it. He's $5K on DraftKings. He's $6,100 on FanDuel. I was shocked when I looked at his utilization recently because I didn't realize how good it's been. Over the past 3 weeks, he has had 11 targets, 7 targets, and then 7 targets. He's had 2 games with 70 or more yards in the past 3 weeks. One of those games, he almost hit 100 yards. And Brandon Cooks is out. He's not going to play. That's definitely helping guys like Jalen Tolbert, but I think it's also going to help someone like Jake Ferguson. And then lastly, the matchup is actually really good. Detroit's been not good against tight ends here recently. Wait, no, that's not right. I mixed up my teams. They've been great against tight ends. So my bad. I was wrong on that. But Jake Ferguson has incredible volume. They're going to pass the ball a ton. And the thing too is it's also a game theory play on this one. I expect that most people are going to play Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb. And that's going to be the way they attack this game. I want to find creative ways to get exposure. I mentioned Jared Goff. I think he will be less rostered than Dak Prescott. I like the idea of playing Jared Goff. Maybe you stack him with Jahmyr Gibbs, do something weird there, and then bring it back with Jake Ferguson.
I like that. That's really interesting, actually. Because those are 3 guys that you're not going to see in a ton of lineups, but those are 3 guys that could easily own this slate at their positions.
Yeah, and I think like the thing with Jahmyr Gibbs, like whenever we talk about stacking players, like yes, it's about picking a quarterback and a pass catcher. But beyond that, it's about betting on a team to pop off. And honestly, the way that Jahmyr Gibbs scores his points, like it can benefit Jared Goff. Like he easily can get receiving touchdowns. And if that happens, like that's effectively stacking with a receiver. And there's no reason to think that Jared Goff can't score 3 touchdowns and Jahmyr Gibbs score 2, because like we also see like Jared Goff would throw the ball to a 6th offensive lineman at times, and like Brock Wright, like Dan Campbell and Ben Johnson, they get weird. They do some weird stuff, and it's not always going to benefit like Amon-Ra St. Brown over and over again, or Sam Laporta over and over again. So I think it's a totally fine way to attack this slate.
Yeah, you tiptoed where I thought you were going to go. I noticed with Jake Ferguson, his last 3 games, 6 catches, 7 catches, 6 catches. I know you're like chasing that consistent volume, and that's basically what you went with it. And obviously your plays when you chase consistent volume, Pat Fryermuth and this week Jake Ferguson, worked out way better than when I told you guys Eric Hall catches 3 balls in every game, or 4 balls in every game. Last week, 2 catches for 10 yards or whatever. Thanks, Eric Hall. Made me look like a moron. Austin, I kind of attack this the way I learned from you to attack it. And I noticed when I was building my lineup, there are 3 games I am super interested in this week. Obviously, it's Dallas, Detroit. Obviously, it's Washington and Baltimore. And then the third for me is Green Bay and Arizona. And we've seen much better Trey McBride coming out of the concussion. He hasn't scored yet except for falling on that touchdown in the end zone. But his target volume this season 9 in week 1, 6 for 6 in week 2, 6 in week 3, and then 6 catches on 9 targets last week for 53 yards. So Trey McBride, while tight end has been bad in fantasy, Trey McBride is seeing the indicators that he has a better week coming up, and Green Bay has not been good against the tight end. So this is a person where, as Arizona's figuring out how to utilize their pass catchers, I do believe there is a consistency between McBride and Kyler Murray that is worth paying up for this week. I love Brock Bowers. He's just a slight bit more expensive than McBride, I believe, on both slates. I love Jake Ferguson. He is cheaper on both slates, but there's just something about getting into that matchup. I have other ways to get into the Detroit-Dallas matchup. I don't have a lot of ways I'm comfortable getting in on the Arizona side of this Green Bay matchup, and that's where I'm going with Trey McBride here.
Yeah, I think that's a really smart way to attack it. And I do think Trey McBride could get a little bit overlooked this week. But I mentioned Jordan Love earlier, so I definitely don't mind playing like Jordan Love.
Oh, your mic went mute, Austin.
We got to fix this mic.
I say we're having a ton of fun tonight.
But I think Trey McBride could get a little bit overlooked this week. So I think it's a good strategy to attack him. And you could, like I mentioned, the Green Bay game earlier, you could do Jordan Love. You can have Jaden Reed with him on that side and bring it back with Trey McBride, especially because people might chase Tucker Kraft after last week. And I think Tucker Kraft is great. I actually was really big on him in the pre-draft process when we were doing, dynasty rookie content a couple years ago. But he caught 2 touchdowns on 4 catches. That's like not sustainable. That's the type of thing that regresses. So I don't want to chase it. I would rather go with someone like McBride, who I know can garner some of the elite volume.
I hope we remember to look this up for next week. I will put any amount of money I can that Tucker Kraft is the most rostered tight end in any tournament, because they just announced Luke Musgrave is also going to IR. So like everybody is just diving in on Tucker Kraft. It could be one of those plays. But you also brought up Josh Jacobs. There's a storyline that works for maybe 1 or 2 lineups where Josh Jacobs is your running back in a Kyler McBride stack, because if Green Bay runs away with this game, one side's throwing, the other side's running. It could be very interesting. And now it's time to move on to defense. This is how we're completing our lineups. So Austin, it worked out really well for me last week. I hope you're able to carry that with you this week.
Yeah, basically it's like, I'm just going to copy paste what Ryan did last week. That's sort of true.
And I do this week again. So
yeah. So the Broncos, they are $3,200 on DraftKings. They're $4,700 on FanDuel. I will say there's a lot of defenses playing rookie quarterbacks this week that you could choose to target. And I definitely contemplated that heavily, and I will probably sprinkle that into different ones of my matchups. But Denver has just been very consistent. They have at least 2 sacks in every single one of their starts this year. They have yet to have a game where they don't produce multiple sacks. They're playing the Chargers. The Chargers, they don't have like elite pass catchers, and Pat Surtain is gonna, I don't know, who's he gonna shadow? Who's worth it?
I was gonna say either Lad McConkey or Quentin Johnson's probably not catching a ball this week.
Yeah, and if one of them's not catching a ball, I don't know who is. And like Denver's been good against the run too. Like they've just been a lockdown defense, and I wouldn't be surprised. Now the Chargers are coming out of the bye, so that might help them a little bit. But like if Denver held them to 10 points, that's not shabby. And honestly, like with a young receiving core, it's very easy to see there being some miscommunication between one of the pass catchers and Justin Herbert, and that leading to something like a Pat Surtain interception that turns into a touchdown, all the better. But I just think that they've been so consistent. They have the potential upside there that I want to bet on them. And what part of the reason I picked them is I think a lot of people are going to do what I was alluding to earlier and chase the teams playing rookie quarterbacks or new starting quarterbacks, as there's been a lot of turnover in the league this week. And so it's kind of a way for me to get different in a tournament setting.
Yeah. And I'm one of those ones who are chasing, but it's a double-edged sword for me. One of the things I noticed when I was building my lineup is I like a lot of really expensive players. I had to go cheap on defense.
Yeah.
So Denver Broncos, Green Bay Packers are highly rated defenses. And I'm learning this season by watching those 2 teams, and I'm going to throw Minnesota out there, And even if it's a questionable defense coming into this season, I did not think either of these three defenses were going to be that great. When they're playing well, they're beating up on these good offenses. Even in their bad games, they're doing well enough. So playing the higher ranked defense is probably the right call, but they also are now getting more expensive. Who hasn't is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and they are getting a rookie quarterback making his debut, Spencer Rattler. A lot of people have a lot of faith in this kid. I'm not saying he's not going to be good, but what I'm saying is Tampa Bay's defense hasn't, and that's why they're cheap. So this is a bit of a risky pick, but I am betting on the fact that Tampa Bay is experienced enough. They have a defensive-focused head coach. I think they're going to be able to come in here and get to this kid, and we should see better sack numbers, better turnover numbers from Tampa Bay this week than we have this season. So this is probably my gamble, but putting it bluntly, I had to go with a cheap defense, and a lot of times the way I start my lineups is find the cheapest defense I trust. And that's for my rankings. I start that way, but I'll start to move people around. And I immediately moved Green Bay and Denver to the top of my list, Austin. But then I had to throw a cheap play in there because I'm in a situation where I need a cheap play. And that's what I'm doing this week is picking on Spencer Rattler, picking on the rookie quarterback.
Yeah, well, and spoiler alert, I had to do the same thing in my cash lineup that I'll be announcing here momentarily. So
there you go. and we'll move right into that. We call this the Valedictorian Shootout. Austin and I are going to announce a head-to-head lineup. We do this based on DraftKings scoring. This is just all fun and games, playing for pride. Austin whooped me again last week. This is what we've expected to happen. Austin dropped 174 points last week. I hit 130, and that was Austin putting out what he openly admitted was a tournament lineup, not a cash lineup. Austin cleaned up last week. More on that in just a few seconds. Austin, with that win, you bring it to 2-3. You're getting closer to making it 500. I have a feeling you'll be taking the lead here soon. As always, I will announce my lineup first. You're going to hear. You'll have heard most of these names earlier in the show, so all of them are going to make sense. I will explain the 3 that I have not talked about yet. So Jaden Daniels, Jahmyr Gibbs, and then as I mentioned, when I wanted to stack Daniels, I went with McLaurin, and then I wanted to get Drake London, who is my favorite wide receiver. So I got expensive at a lot of positions. So I had to go cheap. So I'm going Tyjae Spears at running back. Indianapolis has given up a ton of points to the running back. This is Tony Pollard's game. I'm hoping in this PPR environment, we could see a good game from Tyjae Spears. McLaurin, Drake London, and then I went Jalen Tolbert. Jalen Tolbert feels chalk, but this is just me versus Austin, so I'm allowed to be a little chalky here. I think a lot of people are going to jump on that. I imagine the cheapest, most effective part of that game environment is going to be Jalen Tolbert. And then I'm taking a flyer on Trey Tucker. Devontae Adams is not playing again. And now we have Aiden O'Connell. And Aiden O'Connell, like Gardner Minshew, will sling the ball. And we've seen that work out really, really well for Trey Tucker, who is just a very fast guy. I don't know if they're going to have to throw a ton against the Chargers. This could be a 10-7 game, and Trey Tucker may do nothing. But Trey Tucker did score a rushing touchdown this season already as well because he's very fast, and they find ways to get him the ball. And then Trey McBride, I wanted 2 Treys on my team. That's the only reason I did that. And then the Tampa Bay defense. Austin, what do you got for me?
Yeah, so similar guys that we talked about earlier. So I have Dak Prescott as my quarterback. I have 2 running backs this week. I think a 3 running back build could be in play this week, just throwing that out there. But my 2 running backs right now are Josh Jacobs and Bijan Robinson. I have 4 wide receivers that are Josh Downs, Xavier Legette, Xavier Hutchinson, and CeeDee Lamb. I have Jake Ferguson, and at tight end, I feel a little bit nervous about having 3 Dallas Cowboys in my lineup. Especially for cash. We'll see if that sustains between now and Sunday, but I'm fine with it right now. And then I also went with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense. I think they are a really interesting cash play, and in part for the reasons that you said about the salary savings, Ryan. Like, there's just so many expensive guys. You got to get cheap somewhere.
Yeah, it's the Treys versus the Xaviers. I'm going to be real interested to see how this plays out next week. We're going to have fun with that. Guys, final reminder of the show. You can play DFS with Austin and myself. I promise you we do not win every week, though I'm about to counter that point here in just a second. But there are links in the description of this video. There are links in Austin's article that drops every Saturday. There are links in the description of our showdown slate that drops every Thursday. We got a ton of DFS content here for you. And if you want to play against us, see if we're as good as we say we are, come in and play. Last week, Austin was as good as he said he was. Fantasy Austin takes down both the DraftKings and FanDuel contest. DraftKings, you dropped 189.72, which is a hell of a score. And perhaps more impressive, you were only 15 points down by switching that over to the FanDuel. 174.02 is a monster FanDuel score. So congratulations, Austin.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And yeah, for anybody that's like, oh, I don't want to play against that guy. This was my best week in DFS I have ever had. To just frame it.
Yeah, I forgot to announce. So we've been doing this for 2.5 years now. This is Austin's 5th win all time. And Austin, just to throw you under the bus because we're doing it right now, you're actually at the bottom of the leaderboard when I had to go and find you, even though it's your 5th win all time. So I don't know how DraftKings sorts their leaderboard, but it has not been kind to you, my friend. But this is also only your first win on FanDuel. And I don't mean to make fun. Austin is great at this, but I just want to reiterate Austin's point. It's not just us winning every single week. So
yeah, which I mean, it works out. I try and I win elsewhere for the record. I just
he's letting y'all win.
No, but jokes aside, it was a good week, and hopefully we'll be able to replicate it this week.
Absolutely. Austin, let people know where they can find DFS content from you.
Yeah, first off, you can catch me on Twitter and Instagram at Austin_FFL. For DFS content, catch me here every Friday for the main slate. Josh and I do a Thursday night showdown slate, so that if you're wanting to play that single game showdown, you can do so. And then, as Ryan mentioned earlier, we have the Cash article that comes out on Saturdays. I recommend that article even more than I do the show sometimes, TBH, because more information.
Got 48 hours of more information to do it. We record the show on Thursday night. You put your article out on Saturday morning, so 36 hours. But regardless, more information is always a good thing in fantasy football. So.
Yeah, we get more injury report information, so that'll tweak my picks a little bit. So make sure you're checking that out to get the latest and greatest.
There you go. As I mentioned at the top of the show, Club Fantasy goes live 6 days a week. We have 12 shows every single week. We're covering you on DFS. We're covering you on Dynasty. We have a show on Saturday morning where we literally have no show sheet and answer your questions for an hour straight. It is free for you to hit that like and subscribe button. Please do it. It helps us out tremendously. Hope you guys have a great weekend building lineups, unless you're in the contest with us, because I'm trying to win this one this week. Got to match what Austin did. Have a great day, guys. See you next week.